I am honored. I am pleased. I am absolutely just I don't know what to say, stunned by this great mother of Africa. In many ways, she is the mother of Africa, the mother of of Kemet. The She represents the ascent of all of the children of Osset. We are delighted to have Dr. Joyce King, a distinguished professor, speak to us now. Dr. King.
But given current political conditions, I do need to say that I'm speaking as a private citizen. I'm not speaking as a representative of the university or the state of Georgia. And that has to do with the kind of political circumstances that we have going on in the state of Georgia. So thank you so much, my friend and brother Molefi Asante. I appreciate this invitation, and it's my honor to be with you and the community. I prepared a PowerPoint because I was a student of St. Clair Drake. And when Drake would start talking, you could never know when he was going to end. And I said, when I get to be in that category, I don't want to do that. So I have a PowerPoint to try to control my presentation. I also need to say this is a work in progress. I'm not coming to you all today with conclusions. I'm sharing with you some of the issues that I'm working through on this topic that Molefi gave me. And he is always ready to challenge with a topic that you must rise to the occasion. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is rise to the occasion of the topic that he gave me. And if you all can see the screen, Molefi asked me to speak on the future of education. And I am adding to that what I refer to as a civilizational history. And our aim is to stay human. And by civilizational, I mean that we are a people with a noble history. We're not just talking about African Americans in the United States. We are recognizing that we are part of a long and noble people who established civilizations globally, and that is our challenge for today. So, are we doing all right with the screen? Everything is okay?
Yes, everything's okay.
All right.
We're just trying to look. We can see what you've put up, but we're also
Okay.
trying to make sure that we have enough time. I think we got a note that our time is running out, so we're trying to fix that. But you go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So, I'm going to start with Asa Hilliard's reference to mental bondage, and I'm going to talk a little bit about from the perspective of Carter G. Woodson's emphasis on propaganda in the schools. And I want to illustrate the innovation that we have experienced and that we need in pursuit of our own ideals. That is our challenge. So I'm using the notion of the African paradigm to frame my comments about the future of education. And you can see here on the screen, Asa said in his introduction to Stolen Legacy, mental bondage is invisible violence. Formal physical slavery has ended in the United States. Mental slavery continues to this present day. This slavery affected the minds of all people, and in one way, it is worse than physical slavery alone. That is, the person who is in mental bondage will be self contained. Not only will that person fail to challenge beliefs and patterns of thought which control him, he or she will defend and protect those beliefs and patterns of thought virtually with his last dying effort. And we have a situation now with these laws that have been passed in various states that people are going ahead of the law and self censoring even before they knock on your door. And Carter G. Woodson said, "It is strange that the friends of truth and the promoters of freedom have not risen up against this present propaganda in the schools and crushed it. This crusade is much more important than the anti-lynching movement because there would be no lynching if it did not start in the classroom." And in my presentation to the California Reparations Task Force, I gave written testimony. I started my testimony with this quote: "Education of Black people, specifically Black youth, must be deliberately geared not only to the preservation of Black history, but also to the recognition of the inability of American, white, European political categories to adequately express the degree of political freedom necessary to deliver Black liberation." That's what we want in the future of education. "Memory of our oppressors," Curry said, "instead of innovation and the pursuit of our own particular ideals, would ultimately lead to the end of Black people." So when we talk about the future of education, we're talking about the future of Black people and actually the future of humanity. And here's a short video. I hope the sound will play.
The governor has spoken up and or supported or embraced some policies, both from the education department there, and others that some would argue, civil rights leaders and faith leaders will argue, moves to restrict the teaching of African American history, or to restrict the language that's used in that too. Some will push back and say what you're teaching is filtered, what you're teaching is censored, and what you're teaching is not the complete history of, and it doesn't take ownership of some other issues. It also served as a place where people went to get educated. A lot of the Black churches were a part of setting up freedom schools, which were schools set up to help people learn how to read and or learn enough about, say, the Constitution, so they can go register to vote. Because in many places, especially in the South, you had to recite a part of the Constitution. Many of the Black folks then couldn't even read, so the Black church helped set up these freedom schools to do that.
So these are churches in Florida that are organizing to resist what the government has done to restrict the teaching of Black history. And one of the pastors said, "We don't need government approval to teach our history." There are 290 churches involved in the Faith in Florida organization, and they are actually serving churches, mosques, and other organizations outside of the state of Florida with their online toolkit. So this is the kind of resistance that really exemplifies what we have been doing all along. And I want to reference the work of Mbog Basong, who says in this book, "African Religion from Quantum Cosmology to the Symbolism of God, being unconcerned about African religion is a cultural mistake. Knowing more about the African paradigm will help us to realize how worthy it is." So I'm suggesting that being in a church inspired educational movement is not enough if we are not also learning more about our own spirituality traditions. And we can appreciate this African paradigm in the work of Diop, John Henry Clark, Amilcar Cabral, Asa Hilliard, Charles Finch, Wade Nobles, Molefi Asante, Sylvia Winter, and Basong. And this conversation about the African paradigm is now going on among Africans on the continent. And Basong is one of those people who is introducing a younger generation of Africans to this wealth of information and perspective that Diop brought forward. And this is from a short video that's online. It's in French, and I'm translating. It says, without Kemite or Maatian African spirituality, there is no science and technological development. Basong is with the Ministry of Culture in Cameroon. So there's something that we need to grapple with in terms of how we're being educated. We hear a lot about the STEM and mathematics, and as though those disciplines are going to solve our problems. But we have to be much more discerning about what we are being taught. In Basong's video, he shows the mathematics of the image of the statue of the pharaoh, and he relates that to what we are understanding as fractals, the designs of cornrows. And this is part of the future of education, how mathematics are being taught. But we have to go deeper than just the technological aspects and relate to the spiritual aspects of who we are as a people and as a civilizational people. Charles Finch has reminded us there are so many points of comparison between ancient Greek and Egyptian culture that most of the Greek culture can be seen to have derived from the older Egyptian, a truth the Greeks themselves never denied. We are familiar with this as Afrocentric educators. He said, especially Herodotus, who affirmed Greek high culture, such as it was, descended from the Egyptian. Now, my generation wasn't taught this in school. When I went to college, we had a whole year of Western civilization that never mentioned anything African. But today, the young people have access to this knowledge base to build on. And there's a spiritual dimension that we have to also embrace and recognize that the anti-African, not just anti-black, but the anti-African.
Yeah, we tried to reconnect you. Oh, okay, we'll call you. Yeah, thank you. So I can send her another link, I guess. Should pick up where you left off. That's good. Okay. So, while you sort of getting this, you can see the direction that she's going in. And the direction that she's going in, this brother Basson that she mentioned from Cameroon, I know him. He's a friend of mine. In fact, he was one of the first people that we thought about bringing into the PhD program at Temple. Basson, who's now working with the Ministry of Culture in Cameroon, was pursuing me all the time about why can't he do a correspondence course from Temple to Cameroon, to Yaoundé. And of course, we were not, there was no way that we could do that. I wish we could. I mean, if we had a proper education and a proper educational institution at Temple that would have seen the broadness, the vision of what was possible, then we would have been able to do that. But there were people that didn't even want us to even talk about having a correspondence course in terms of African culture and African studies. They Dr. Kimani Nehusi proposed such um, a course, an online course, where you can get a master's degree in African studies that we would run in our department. And that was denied. The university denied. Because the university doesn't have the vision we have. Those deans and so on, they're not coming from the same space we're coming from. And some of them were coming from the MAGA Republican base. People sometimes think that university people are different, but they're the same people that you see in the community, in the society. They're not that different from other people. And so their view of African knowledge and African studies and all of that, their view is the same view sometimes as you will find from people in the community who have these negative views about African people. And so this is the way I felt, you see. Yes, Doctor.
Do other departments at Temple have a corresponding outside of the
I think some of them have. Yeah, some of them have.
Wow,
You can
how
create.
about that?
Yeah, you can create. Yeah, you can create those programs. In fact, they encourage you to do that, but not with African studies. You know, it's almost like it's almost like the DeSantis thing. In fact, one of the things that I was writing today is that I was writing earlier today because I try to write every day. But I was writing today and I'm trying to think about the situation of DeSantis in 2022 and 23. In 22 and 23, you know, there was this big push for what they call the advancement, the advanced placement curriculum for African American studies and history. And the state of Florida said, no, we don't want the advanced placement because we disagree with some of the things that are being put in this advanced placement. And we also disagree with some of the people. And most people don't know that I was one of the people that they disagreed with. In fact, my name appeared on TV. I was shocked. You know what I mean? But my name was on TV with people like Giovanni, the poet, Nicky Giovanni. And I'm saying, you know, they said these are the people that DeSantis does not want these people studied in school. He doesn't want, they should not be in books for children. And so, Doctor, yes, please.
I just wanted to add what you were saying, Doc. Just this month, we received an email that I just pulled up that was titled CLA, the College of Liberal Arts, is the new home for the Council of European Studies.
Yeah,
And
you see,
it says,
look at that.
It says, we'll be moving to Temple University, specifically sitting within our college. After 30 years at Columbia University, the Council of European Studies will start a new chapter with the Temple community. Interdisciplinary study of Europe fits well within our walls, especially for
You see
political
what I'm
science,
saying?
history, and European languages and literature.
Yeah, it's been, so they can do the Council of European Studies. They don't want to do the Council of African Studies. And that's what I'm saying to you. That what we have not yet understood, and I think that Dr. Joyce was bringing it home when she quoted from Asa Hilliard and from Tommy Curry and from Carter Woodson and from Finch. What she was bringing home was that some of us even would defend Temple. You know what I mean? That the mental problem, the mindset that we have to defend those patterns, even when those patterns are against us. And you know, so I don't mind them having a Council of European Studies, so long as they say that there's no blockage for us having African studies, you see? And this is the problem, and I think that this whole question of the future of education, which Dr. Joyce is going to get, hold just a minute.
So I just sent it to her.
You just sent it to her, thank you so much. This Brother James, has been a savior, because let me just tell you, Brother Kareem is not well. He's down with bronchitis and so on, so he couldn't be here today, and he just got his friend to come and help us out today with this technological thing. And so I made a number of mistakes, and one of them was I probably didn't give enough time through Dr. Joyce on the Zoom. So he's trying to fix that for us, and I thank you very much, Brother James, for doing that. But the point, back to my point, the point that I was making, which is a point that she had also made, and she will continue to make, I'm sure, is that if you look at the work of the people like Herodotus, and I wrote a book about Herodotus, I even analyzed some of Herodotus's statements, you will realize that the actual strength of what we know as Greek philosophy came from African philosophy. And that's exactly what George G.M. James said. There is no, in Stolen Legacy, that there is no Greek philosophy. There is only stolen African philosophy. And this is what we sometimes do not understand and do not appreciate. But once we appreciate that and we understand the value of African traditions, so much so that we will also appreciate not only the value of African traditions, but the precise way in which our society, this society, what we call a neoliberal, capitalist, imperialistic society, has gathered its pan-European academy to work against our interests, then maybe we will be mentally free to think a way out of bondage, because that's the thing that we really want to talk about and want to know. So we are just waiting for her to come on. We, thank you very much. Appreciate you. That brother is always on top of what the things ought to be, right? You just got it. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much. She just got the link. So she got the link, and
will she be able to give her entire lecture?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, she will. We yeah, but you. She has to 5:30, so that's good. That's enough time, and yeah, she has a 5:30. We just want to wait till she gets. She's. I think she's coming in now. Let me just see if I can. That must, hopefully that's her. Dr. King, are you there? Yeah, I think Dr. King is. I think she is here. James. We see you, Dr. King, and we apologize from the bottom of our hearts. We're
That's no problem.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can let me have screen sharing privilege.
I will let you have screen sharing privileges, and we were very, very happy and proud of what you were telling us, and so I just tried to keep the audience here. Nobody left to go anywhere. They said can she give her full presentation? We say yeah, you got until 5:30. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
All
Doc.
right. So I'm gonna come back with the slides, and you saw the video with the churches in Florida, and I said that they were responding and resisting this suppression of the teaching of our history and heritage in the state of Florida. And I used the example of Brother Basong, the Cameroonian geologist, to talk about what I'm calling the African paradigm. And picking up with Charles Finch, we know as Afrocentric thinking people that the Greeks got what they got by studying in Egypt. And I said that when I was a student at Stanford as an undergrad, I had a whole year of Western civilization with no mention of anything African. And fortunately, our children now have access to this foundational knowledge if it is taught. And this problem of anti African violence is not just in the educational realm in schools, it permeates every aspect of Western culture and society. And the Christian religion can be understood also to derive from what is ancient Egyptian. And this image here represents that understanding. Before, after, and way after. So we have some work to do in terms of the future of education wherever we are being educated, whether it's in schools, in our churches, in the communities. And what I'm talking about as the future of education has to stand, first of all, on a civilizational understanding of our history of resisting anti-African violence and staying human. And this future of education that I'm talking about is not just resistance, but it certainly is resistance. And the philosophy of education that comes out of ancient Kemet perfectibility of the human, staying human, that's part of this African paradigm. So I'm going to go through this chronology, this historical perspective rather quickly, but I just want to make sure that we are all aware of the foundation we're standing on, because this foundation is what enables us to have an educational future. So going all the way back to the Nile Valley, if you look in the top left, the mystery schools go down below to 1300. St. Coré, the University of Timbuktu, 17,000 manuscripts, not just written in Arabic, but also in African languages, which we don't have access to in terms of studying what our ancestors knew and recorded. Go back up to the top. By 1830, our ancestors were organizing what's called the Colored Conventions movement. They were meetings in Philadelphia, in different states, with delegates from Canada all the way to Georgia, organizing for what kind of liberation we needed from 1830 to 1888. Come down 1850, here's a model of what we have done in the past to meet our challenges. In the 1850s, under enslavement, Mrs. Lillian Granderson operated a secret midnight school, teaching people to read, and the ones she taught then taught others. Go back up to the top, Reconstruction. The history tells us that public education came about post-Civil War because freed people created constitutions state by state to provide for public schools. 1909, Nanny Helen Burroughs Training School included a Black History test. Du Bois presented a massive amount of information about African history and heritage in his pageants, which he called the Star of Ethiopia, which he mounted in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York, and Los Angeles up to 1925. And then we have the father of Black history, Carter G. Woodson, with Negro History, which we know was more than just a week. It was a mobilization of educators, curriculum development, engaging children with that knowledge, and transforming education from the inside. So I'm saying the past is prologue. This civilizational history that I'm encapsulating very, very quickly for us, from the ancient Egyptians through the University of St. Corée, the Midnight School, the Star of Ethiopia, Du Bois's Brownies books, which he organized for the children, and all the way up to recent Amistad commissions that require the teaching of African American history across several states: New York, Chicago. The first Amistad Commission was in New Jersey. So that's what I mean. The past is prologue. What we've done in the past enables us, should tell us that we have the capacity to meet this challenge. 1932, Claire Muhammad School. 1951, William Patterson and Paul Robeson presented the petition to the UN, We Charge Genocide. We have to also recognize that our experience has always been global and international. Diop defended his thesis, presenting the evidence that the Egyptians were black in 1954. 1957, Septima Clark, her niece Bernice Robinson, and bus driver Esau Jenkins established the first citizenship school on Johns Island. These citizenship schools went all the way across the South, educating people, teaching people to read in order to vote. And then 1968, my era, Black Studies, the strike at San Francisco State, and all across the country in these higher education, we had Black Studies established. 1969, on the continent, Julius Nyerere established education for self-reliance. And this is really important because what was going on the continent also affected the education that we experienced here. And Nyerere's education for self-reliance is so powerful to remember. Those receiving secondary education in Tanzania would be expected to render more service to the communities financing their education. The school curriculum was to be changed so as to make the content of all subjects more relevant to Tanzanian children, to introduce productive activities such as work on farms, and then workshops to relate the lessons very closely to the daily life and work of the children, and to merge theory and practice. The parents were to take part in the school activities, and farmers and agricultural extension workers could act as teachers. Education with us becomes supportive of the overall development of the country. That was the philosophy of education for self-reliance and development in Tanzania in 1967 and 69. Come back to the U.S., Nairobi College was established in East Palo Alto. I taught my first sociology course at Nairobi College. And then going down to 1969 through 1983, the Institute of the Black World in Atlanta, Malcolm X Liberation University in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the Black Panther Community School in Oakland. The Amistad Commissions created, as I said, across these different states, and the UN Decade for People of African Descent was established in 2015, and we're coming to the end of that. I've heard that it's going to be extended, but we need to recognize also that the diaspora is the sixth region of the African Union. So when we're talking about education, a future of education, we're also talking about the future of African people here and there in the world. So what else is going on? Black Studies as the study of the world. I recommend to you Abdul Al-Kalimat's online course in Black Studies. Dr. Greg Carr has an online course on Saturday mornings, In Class with Carr. At UC Berkeley right now, there's a team working on a Black history curriculum for California that is linked to the California Reparations Task Force Initiative. And in New York City, the Black Education Research Center has created a Black Studies curriculum for the New York City Public Schools at Teachers College. And as I mentioned, I made a written presentation to the task force in California on reparations, and my point was why we need Black Studies and teacher preparation. These are just some of the initiatives that are going on from our perspective that are part of our future. Contrast that with the bureaucratic paradigm. In 2017, 26% of Black students were proficient in fourth grade reading compared to 46, almost 50% of white students. Now, any nation that has only 50% of their children reading at the grade level is not doing well, but you can see we're doing worse. Black men comprise about 13% of the population, but 35% of those incarcerated. And I'm calling this the bureaucratic paradigm because that's what it is producing. These are the outcomes. Ishmael Reed asked, do Black and brown boys have to go to prison to gain literacy? And you see here an image of the incarcerated taking classes. And several universities are involved in offering courses and even degrees to the incarcerated. But is that the future that we want to hold up? In 2015, 10 years ago, 76% of Black children in K-12 schools were taught by white teachers. Only 7% had African American teachers. And there's a whole narrative and research about what has happened to Black teachers. Where have they gone since Brown? Black girls are the fastest growing population within the juvenile justice system. And Dr. Jawan Zakunjufu reported that only 18% of Black girls are proficient in reading. He asked, why are Black girls having such a difficult time learning to read? Why has America been so silent? So our children are not succeeding in this bureaucratic paradigm. The future of education also compels us to ask, what does it mean to be human in this digital age? As I mentioned, there's a lot of emphasis on STEM, mathematics, and science, but the very wise sociologist and science expert Dr. Alondra Nelson asked, so Black girls code, then what? That's a question we should be concerned about. Then what? Technology offers digital education innovations, but are any and all tech resources really good for us? How would we know? How can we evaluate what this technology offers us? Returning to Dr. Asante and Dr. Nadav on being human being, they say the human project is grounded in the optimistic belief that human beings are capable of seeing truth and then transforming themselves and their societies. That's what the future of education is about. They further remind us that dismantling the house of race, which has been so consuming and such a distraction, and erecting the house of humanity calls for action. The future of education calls for action on every communication and education front, introducing a new episteme, a new way of thinking, a new system of knowledge, and a cultural meme deriving from the most ancient value of ma'at. In other words, deriving from the African paradigm. Textbooks will have to be modified. School and college curricula will have to be rewritten to reflect the unity of humanity. Well, who is going to do that? We have to prepare ourselves to do that. This is an example from Dr. Carr's posts on formerly Twitter, on X. This event happened yesterday, and I just present this to show that we can use technology in ways to really liberate us and organize ourselves to fight for the future that we need. He says, as protests against violence and slaughter spread across U.S. colleges and universities, it's important to note that HBCU students continue to raise and connect issues of global anti-African violence. And the HBCU community is involved also in the education of incarcerated folks. So, meanwhile, public education is being dismantled state by state. This is part of the backlash. If black folks, formerly enslaved, helped to bring about public education after the Civil War, now we're in a period where the third Reconstruction is taking place, and state by state, education is being dismantled. High stakes testing, school closures, state laws are supercharging book bans. States are allowing teachers to carry guns. That was in the news yesterday. Censorship laws affect not only teachers, but professors like me in higher education and students. That's why I said I'm speaking as a private citizen, not representing the state of Georgia. And vouchers are on the rise. Parents are being allowed to use public funds for private schools. We have serious racialized impacts of COVID that are affecting our children in our schools, and teacher shortages. So I'm going to bring my comments to an end with just a couple of other reminders. This is what Du Bois said in a speech to HBCUs. He spoke at a graduation in 1960. He said, any statement of our desire to develop American Negro culture, to keep our ties with colored people, to remember our past, is being regarded as racism. We're back there right now. And he says, I am not fighting to settle the question of racial equality in America by the process of getting rid of the Negro race, getting rid of black folk, not producing black children, forgetting the slave trade and slavery and the struggle for emancipation, or forgetting abolition, and especially ignoring the whole cultural history of Africans in the world, our civilizational history. And this was in his talk, Whither, Now, and Why. So this is an image of the Faith in Florida website, where they are offering a toolkit to the pastors and other folks who are teaching Black history in their churches. But I would just urge us to think about, what does the African paradigm mean when we have to also look at the truth of quote unquote religion versus spirituality. And the conversations that are going on now on the continent are very exciting, looking at science and religion as part of our heritage. So finally, we do not start our story with slavery. That's very important. If you are evaluating anybody's curriculum, if they start with slavery, they need to go back to the drawing board. And finally, we do have criteria, we do have standards that reflect our own perspectives on truth. And Dr. Susan Goodwin and I developed a set of criteria for contextualized teaching and learning about people of African descent back in 2004. So just to say, everybody, that we have a history of effective education that we can draw on to respond to this challenge that we're facing today, to stay human. And that is my presentation. And I finished before 4 o'clock, Doctor.
Thank you so much. Wow, wow. Dr. Joyce, the Benjamin E. Mays Chair at Georgia State University. Dr. King, will you be willing to take a couple of questions?
Oh, sure.
From the audience. All right. Well, we'll be getting the microphone. And just 1 minute, let me just check. We are looking to see if there were any from the live stream, because there are some questions. All right, but we have, okay, first question. Okay, doctor, yes, right. Oh, the volume? Oh, the volume for the mic.
Brilliant presentation, Dr. King. We really enjoyed it. Um, I heard on the radio not too long ago, I think yesterday, that Biden is reducing funding for charter schools. What impact do you think that has for African schools, African freedom schools, African charter schools, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, we're always caught between a rock and a hard place. So some of our community schools are charter schools, some are not. And I think our self-reliance and self-determination means we have to be paying attention to what those kinds of policy changes, how they will impact us. There is no silver bullet. There's no one place that is safe. We have to be vigilant wherever we are. So for those charter schools that may reduce funding, we just have to have a stronger connection with our communities and try to bring that money back from other places. That's my off the cuff thought about it.
May I ask Dr. Joyce a question and Dr. King? Dr. King, well, what about the private schools? You know, it seemed like our private schools, the ones that we have supported in the past. I know during the 70s and the 80s, we had these private schools.
The independent black institutions.
Independent black institutions. How does that look in your judgment?
I think the questioner has, raised the issue that some of those independent black institutions have become charter schools in local districts. And so those would be affected if this funding is reduced. I haven't heard that about Biden's action, but we're always playing catch up when it comes to funding.
Sure. All right, there's another question.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Joyce King. Okay, my question is, okay, so I was reading, the slide, and when talking about the proficiency of reading levels for the black boys and black girls, so we see that they're in the 18% for boys and 13% for girls, was it, or something like that?
Not proficient. We can just leave it at that. That they're not reading on grade level.
Yes. So, okay. So my question is, what would be an accurate assessment to determine if a child is reading proficiently?
Okay, that's a good question.
When I was organizing parents and my children were in elementary school, we decided to see if the child could read the back of the cereal box.
That's a good one.
So, there's some mystification going on in terms of reading. There's debates about the science of reading and neuropsychology. But the example I gave from the midnight school, the enslaved woman who had classes from midnight to 2 a.m. teaching people to read. So where is the mystery of teaching people to read? We just need to look at those examples where our children are doing well and learn from each other and not be mystified by these pseudo-scientific arguments about what it takes to read. Asa Hilliard always said, there's no child who can't learn. First, you love that child, and then you connect with the child and the family and create an atmosphere that is supportive. So this is about our collective work and responsibility. I hope I answered your question.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Dr. King, thank you so much. That was so educational with the presentation. My concern, I'm quite sure yours is, what's going on with us, the lack of black teachers? Are they not pursuing the career of education? I know many of them have retired. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, this is coming up on the 70th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education. And Dr. Leslie Fenwick at Howard has a very powerful book, Jim Crow's Pink Slip, where she analyzes what has happened to the Black teaching and leadership profession. But today, with all the things that are going on in education, many teachers are leaving the profession because of the lack of respect for teachers, the surveillance, the just the repression going on in education. So there are also at the same time initiatives to recruit Black teachers. Um, the brother in Philadelphia, I'm blocking on his name now. The education program that he's running is recruiting Black teachers. We have several initiatives to bring Black teachers into the profession, but we don't just need a Black teacher. We need a Black teacher that's thinking Black.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
Very,
that's a community
very.
opportunity to support teachers to help them grow because they're not getting the orientation that they should have for our liberation in their preparation program. So we have to find some partnerships and ways to really support those educators so that they can defend themselves and defend the children.
That's right. Dr. King, thank you so much for your wonderful lecture. And we, again, apologize for the technical snafu, but you gave a powerful lecture, and it will be long remembered here at the Maleficenti Asante Institute. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
good day.
And